Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about Hearthstone. Hearthstone is a game that I love and I'm sure many of you do too. It recently celebrated 100 million players, but is the game in a healthy state? Is it as popular as it once was? And was the Boomsday Project actually a success or not? I wanted to make this video because there's been a lot of talk and negativity online in the community about Hearthstone dying, players leaving for other games and the current meta game being boring and frustrating. Disguised Toast, for example, is playing a lot less Hearthstone on his channel. Savage has also came out and said that he's going to be playing Artifact and doesn't want to be playing Hearthstone anymore. This line of thinking is pretty natural given the fact that Hearthstone is already almost 5 years old. There's also increasing competition with the upcoming release of Artifact, which is a new card game from Valve, a huge company, and with Magic the Gathering Arena already in its open beta. To be perfectly honest with you, I myself have cut down my Hearthstone playtime over the last month or so because I've become tired of playing the same decks over and over again. This fatigue is common in the final month before a new expansion, but I've kind of felt it more this time around. I feel like the meta just feels too similar to what we played through in the Witchwood. There's not enough new decks for me, and those new cards that we put in didn't really change the meta that much. But is there any truth to these claims? Was the Boomsday a failure? Is Hearthstone dying? I could just flippantly answer yes or no to all of these questions, but let's take a look at some of the facts before we try and make a conclusion. I don't want to make a shock video making wild claims about the state of the game. I want to kind of just look at the stats, look at the data that we know, and have an honest discussion about it because I really enjoy Hearthstone and I want it to be successful for a long time. So the first thing I want to take a look at is the Boomsday Project expansion as a whole. And let me start by saying that I love the start of the Boomsday Project. I feel like there were tons and tons of new decks to try. I was playing massive pogo hoppers, destroying opponents with Mechathune, stealing decks with Togwaggle, yes, Togwaggle was finally a decent deck, and building lots of huge mechs. Also, we played a lot of Giggling Inventors, but that's a slightly different story. However, what I found was that pretty quickly after maybe the first month, the same odd suspects, particularly Druid decks and Odd Paladin, just rose to the top. There was no longer any reason to play a lot of the newer cards that came with the Boomsday Project expansion. Now, this happens in a lot of expansions. It always happens that after the first month, the main decks settle, but I kind of feel like we didn't see many Boomsday Project cards making a big impact, so we were playing a lot of the same decks as we've played in previous expansions. So that's just my feeling, but let's take an actual look at the stats and see how this represents. So I think a good place for us to start is to look at the top 100 most played cards, and I've kind of put together some statistics. They all came from HS Replay, and it is a snapshot of the current meta, not from the start of the expansion, because I think that gives us a good representation about how the meta settled and kind of what we've been playing for the last couple of months. Kobolds and Catacombs, there's 23 cards out of the top 100 come from Kobolds and Catacombs. So the main offenders here are Fungalmancer, Kobold Librarian and Jasper Spellstone. Very strong cards and not really much of a surprise there. The next biggest set actually comes from the Classic set, and the Classic set has 21 cards in this top 100. And then right at the very bottom we have the Boomsday Project, with actually out of the top 100 cards, only 4 of those cards are from the Boomsday Project. And when you look at it, Ziliax is placed as the 10th most played card, and then actually Soul Infusion is the next highest, all the way down in 62nd place. So when you look at this and you consider that combined the top 100 cards represent 53% of all the cards played in this current meta, you start to realize that the Boomsday Project doesn't really impact it very much. Ziliax is a neutral card and it's a mech and it has loads of mech synergies, but actually the reason it's one of the best or most played cards in the set is not because it synergizes with mech so much, it's just that people can play it on its own and it's a very, very strong anti-aggro card. The other two cards that I've featured here, Doubling Imp and Soul Infusion, well, they are actually really strong in Zoo, and Zoo's already a very popular deck, so of course they would go straight into it. But they don't change that Zoo deck, they make Zoo just a little bit stronger. The only other card from the Boomsday Project to feature in the top 100 was Spider Bomb, And of course we see that played in Death Rattle Hunter, which is a very, very popular deck. And again, that's not played because of its mech synergies, that's played because of its synergies with the Play Dead and also Terrascale's Stalker and the Carnivorous Cube. And one final stat here that I want to mention is that when you look at all of the cards played in the current meta, only 9% of them come from the Boomsday Project. So only 4 of them are in this top 100, but then out of all of the cards in the Boomsday Project, they only represent 9% of all cards. So people just aren't playing them. They really are not playing cards from the Boomsday Project. Now there are a number of things that I should say here. Clearly Kobolds and Catacombs has been out for a very long time. Boomsday Project is brand new. So people are used to the cards from Kobolds and Catacombs. They're more likely to have more cards from that set because they've had longer to grind gold and buy cards from that set. Boomsday Project is brand new. Perhaps people are still trying to build up their collection. Also, because the Boomsday Project has only just been introduced into the game, the developers still have a number of expansions where they might want to explore the synergies from the Boomsday Project. So it doesn't necessarily have to represent a huge amount, but I just think that it's surprising how little the Boomsday Project actually is impacted. And as a player, I would personally, every time there's a new expansion, I personally like to have them represent the highest proportion of cards. I don't know whether that's realistic, seeing as they're just brand new to the game, but I feel like only seeing 4 of them in the top 100 just seems like a little to me, too little to me, and not much of an impact. And this chart here shows all of the cards which are in 5% of decks or more. So these are the cards that you're going to be seeing the most of. Out of all of the cards that are in at least 5% of decks, most of those cards come from the classic set. And apart from that, it's a very similar picture to what we saw in the previous slide. Only 5 cards from the Boomsday Project are included in more than 5% of decks. So again, every single other Boomsday Project card is only in less than 5% of the decks, so you're not likely to see those cards very much. Now actually the card that you see in the most decks is the Lich King from the Frozen Throne. That's in 26.3% of decks. So 1 in every 4 decks does have the Lich King in it, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. That's a lot of Lich Kings. And to be fair, Ziliax is actually in second place with 24% of decks that have Ziliax. And that's no surprise because both the Lich King and Ziliax are very, very powerful neutral legendaries which can stand on their own 2 feet. Although Ziliax has a lot of mech synergies, it's proven that it doesn't actually need those mech synergies to be good. So again, what we're looking at here is that most decks don't have a Boomsday Project card in them. You're unlikely to see a Boomsday Project card when you're playing Hearthstone at the moment. You're more likely to see cards from the classic set, and that's pretty normal because classic cards do define a lot of the classes. They're available to everybody, but Kobolds and Catacombs, Knights of the Frozen Throne, those were really powerful expansions that people just keep coming back to and keep playing those cards. And speaking of the meta, these are the tier 1 and tier 2 decks as of the middle of November this year, and you can see there aren't really any new decks. There are a few changes to some of the decks, but mostly it's the same things we've been playing before. Odd Paladin, Even Shaman, Even Paladin, Secret Hunter, Odd Rogue, all at tier 1 decks that we've seen for a long time. Now tier 2 is pretty good. Like there's a huge variety of different decks you can play. They're all around a similar power level, which is what you want. But the problem is we have played all these decks so many times. Death Rattle Hunter, Zoo Warlock, Even Warlock, Mid-Range Hunter, they're just the same decks that have been around for so long. So really the Boomsday didn't make enough of an impact on the meta, and it really shows. And another thing is that I don't think Blizzard made the most out of the nerfs because they didn't really shake up anything. This table here is the meta before they did the nerfs. So this was the day before they made the nerfs. And actually the tier 1 and 2 decks are very similar, except that there is Quest Rogue before they made the nerfs, because of course Giggling Inventor was quite a big part of Quest Rogue. So that was a nice change to lose that deck that we've had for ages and ages. But it didn't really shake anything else up. There wasn't any sort of new decks emerging, and that's kind of what I want to see from nerfs. So how is Hearthstone doing on Twitch? Well, I think it's worthwhile looking into, because although not perfect, it is a good measure of how popular the game is. So if you look here in this first chart, this shows the number of hours viewed of Hearthstone by month back to December 2016, and the hours viewed are in millions. And you can very easily see a pattern here that when a new expansion launches, they get a huge peak in viewers. Mean Streets of Gadgetzan, for example, was just over 50 million hours viewed in the month of December, and then you have the drop off after the excitement of the expansion. And that pattern repeats over all of the expansions, and you'd expect that to be quite natural. But what you can see, and what is actually a little bit alarming, is that once again, and a theme throughout this video, is that the Boomsday Project is right at the bottom. So the Boomsday Project actually had the lowest amount of hours viewed in the launch period, but also it had the lowest in the subsequent months, in month 2 and month 3 as well. So obviously we haven't got November's data here, but if you look at 2017 from January through to October compared to January through to October in 2018, there is an 18% decline in people watching, or the amount of time that they're watching Hearthstone. Now that's pretty natural. I mean, the game's getting older, but it is quite an alarming dip. I should remind you though, these are millions of hours viewed. So the Boomsday Project in its first month had 37.7 million hours of view time on Twitch. So that's still a lot of people watching this game. So although it has been in decline, there's still a lot of people watching it. Now Gadgetzan and Nguru were clear winners here, but you can see Frozen Throne, Cobble's Catacombs and Witchwood all sort of stayed on a similar kind of level. There were similar levels of interest throughout their expansions. And like I said before, the Boomsday Project didn't really impact the meta, and maybe that had an impact on people's interests as well. So maybe this is just a blip. It's just one blip of one expansion which didn't really hit very well, and I personally am very excited for the new expansion. So perhaps if that really impacts the game and people are getting excited about it again, we'll see another uptake in viewing. So does Hearthstone have anything to fear from its competition? Well, that's really difficult to say because Artifact is literally only just coming out now, and Magic the Gathering is still in its beta as well. Still, both games still in their infancy and growing in popularity. But I want to bring to your attention this article by Reese Elliott on newzoo.com, and they use data from users of the Overwolf apps. And what they found was here, Magic the Gathering Arena's strong start had no negative impact on Hearthstone, and this was in October. Magic's impressive debut had no visible consequences for Hearthstone. What's more, Hearthstone actually saw an increase in player share, jumping from 14% to 15% in October. So you can see this article, obviously, based on just that limited data, is suggesting that it didn't really have an impact. And actually, healthy competition is something that will be really good for Hearthstone, because I don't think there has been much of a threat from other areas. And I think that not only will it bring new players into the card game genre, which may even eventually migrate over to Hearthstone, it actually kind of puts some pressure on the Blizzard team to improve Hearthstone. Make it better, make new features, make it cheaper, more accessible for new players, potentially adding new modes for us to play, particularly the tournament mode, which was such a disappointment to lose out on earlier this year. Now, Artifact has a lot of hype around it, and mostly because I think it's a new game from Valve, who hasn't released a game in a long time, so everyone's quite keen to see what it's like. But let me show you this tweet from Disguised Toast. He talks about the pros and cons of Artifact, and he actually ends the tweet by saying it's not the game for him. Tice also expressed concerns about the economy of the game, which I know Valve are working on, but also talked about how he thinks that it's a difficult game for new viewers to watch. Unless you play the game, it's not going to appeal to casual viewers. But personally, I hope that both of these games will be successful, because I think it would be good for the card game genre as a whole, and also some healthy competition might help push Blizzard towards adding some extra features to Hearthstone. So in conclusion, unfortunately I have to say that the Boomsday Project was a disappointment for me. I really enjoyed the cards, I really enjoyed the new mechanics they introduced, but unfortunately many people can measure their enjoyment of the game with their experience on the ladder, because that is where a lot of people spend their time. And what I showed in the stats is that the Boomsday Project just didn't impact the ladder experience. Most of it was very similar to what we already knew. We were playing with the same cards, you're playing against the same cards, throwing up the same kind of situations. It'll be really interesting to see how the Rastakhan's Rumble actually impacts the meta. I've seen some of the cards and I'm really hopeful for it. I think it's going to be really good. I'm really excited to try it, so that is definitely a good thing. But hopefully I'm not standing here in 4 months' time saying that only 9% of Rastakhan's cards really made an impact on the meta, because in my opinion, I want it to be much more of an impact. So you see these new cards and you learn how to play around them, because that's, for me, is what the most fun about Hearthstone is. Just discovering new cards and discovering the new mechanics. But is Hearthstone dead? Absolutely not. And should you stop playing it? I don't think so. But nobody can answer that question except for yourself. You just need to ask yourself, do you still enjoy it? And for a lot of us, it was probably, well, the Boomsday wasn't quite what I wanted. But I'm really hopeful for the future of the Rastakhan and expansions beyond, because when you look at it in isolation, it's just one expansion that was a bit of a blip. In my opinion, the most important thing is to have fun, regardless of which game you're playing. I'm still excited for the future of Hearthstone, and I will be playing it for a long time to come. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I know it's a little bit different to the normal videos that I do, and I hope it didn't come off too negative. That really wasn't my intention. I was just becoming a little bit frustrated with the Boomsday meta, and I think it was quite a relevant topic to talk about. But I'd really be interested to hear what you guys think, so please let me know in the comments, and feel free to disagree with me as well, because it's always interesting to hear your opinions. But anyway guys, I'm really looking forward to new expansions, so until then, I'll see you in the next video.